So a while ago, one of my audience members told me to do a small exposition on the boss fights of Gotham Knights as compared to Arkham Knight. Now, before I jump into it, I want to go ahead and say that Clayface, his boss fight, is probably one of the worst in Gotham Knights, if not the worst. It's fun in the way that it was set up and it was structured, but from a development perspective, I don't know what they were thinking, or maybe I just don't know how to play against this boss. But this boss has some really weird hitboxes that are strange, in my opinion. And it's almost difficult to understand how chaotic, his fight is. But you can actually get the job done. It's not going to be the cleanest fight ever. And some people are probably going to laugh at me and say, this sounds like a skill issue. I get it, but it doesn't necessarily flow like the other boss fights that you have in the game. Harley Quinn probably has the best one so far, and then you have, Mr. Freeze, which is okay in my mind. I don't necessarily think that that's, entirely a bad thing when it comes to the way they did Mr. Freeze. Mecha Freeze is really weird too, but you can kind of get around his arena. His arena allows for aerial and some other really cool stuff. But in the case of, say, a character like, what's his name, Clayface, you're stuck on the ground. You have to keep dealing with a lot of area of effect, auto-targeting type, things. And it's just all over the place, man. You will find it hard to beat this particular character. In fact, I tried to play his showdown the other day, and I was so mad. Look at it here. You're dodging, but he still hits you. It's like, do I dodge a different direction for a different hit? And so it's kind of weird to try to master the combat. That being said, this boss fight is better than every single boss fight, almost. Not every, but almost every single boss fight in Batman Arkham Knight. Arkham Knight had some of the poorest boss encounters that I have ever seen in an Arkham game. In fact, it makes Arkham Origins look good, even way better than it. Sure, a game can have all the flash and all the pizzazz and all of the beautiful, pretty looks, but substance is very, very important in a game. Now, I like Batman Arkham Knight. Regardless of the mediocrity of the boss fights, I'm still willing to say this is one of my favorite games because, again, googly eyes, ooh, sometimes shiny, can really, in a sense, blindfold, your eye of criticism. And sometimes you come back and you say, man, this truly kind of sucked. What you're seeing here in this particular clip is the boss fight that Batman has with Deathstroke. Yes. You do it in a Batmobile, which, in my opinion, is probably one of the most asinine things I've ever seen in my life. They bring Deathstroke, who is what I think one of Batman's most formidable, more interesting enemy, characters, and they bring him into Arkham City in the most wanted missions, and you have to actually do and fight this guy, or do the mission anyways, and fight this bad guy in a tank battle. I can't imagine what the thinking was behind this. I certainly cannot fathom why the developers would decide to go this direction, because to me, I thought this was very strange. By the way, I'm playing it here on this video in nightmare mode, so I had to play it not only once, not twice, about 3 times. The third time was in nightmare mode so I could get my 240 degrees. And then at the end of the day, when you destroy his tank, he jumps out. You basically jump out of your Batmobile, you do a counter, and, as he comes out, here it is. This is the entirety of the interaction you get with this guy in this, particular game. You get on top and then you punch him and you knock him out with one punch. And that's it. You put him in a Batmobile and you're gone. Now, we could talk about Professor Pig, which is probably a nicer boss fight in a sense, which kind of allows for you to throw hands with the character. We can also maybe go ahead and look at, say, even Man-Bat, but, Dr. Langstrom's own was basically kind of like get his DNA, do this and do that. You could look at the Riddler, you get to throw hands with him, but before you throw hands with him, you literally have to pace your way through almost all of the puzzle. Oh, no, I said almost. All of the puzzles in the game, and then you're given permission to come throw hands with the most annoying character in the whole wide world. So when you look at all these things, it seems like, we're complaining, but I don't think it's a complaint. I think it's just a post-mortem in terms of criticism that Batman Arkham Knight had, in my opinion, some really terrible boss fights overall. It brings me to a tweet that I remember. Somebody made this tweet a long time ago, and it goes thus. Thoughts on this opinion I found a tad bit harsh or fair. Now, this was posted by Daily Arkham Memes, and somebody put a little thing and said, worst atmosphere, worst story, worst boss fights, worst gameplay, all pointing at Gotham Knights. Now, for most of you, you've seen my past few videos where I talked about a lot of the different approaches that people had towards the Arkham games. When you go back and look at the reviews from back then, you can tell that this particular opinion is something that, Arkham Memes found. Somebody had actually put this up, not him, but he was basically asking and saying, hey, what do you guys think? Now, I laughed and I replied, and this was a long time ago. This was January 7th. I said, this opinion means to tell us that fighting Slade Wilson in a tank is better than throwing hands with Clayface. Wonders shall never cease on Twitter. Worst boss fights? I mean, and we've also talked about the world and the atmosphere of Gotham Knight, being something that is much more akin in regard to how it's set up to, what's the world in Batman versus Robin, Joel Schumacher's Batman, and his Batman Forever themes, both the neon lights and the somewhat cyberpunk style design of the game. These are the elements that the game has. So whenever we come out with this conversation about, the Arkham games and so on and so forth, I think there's more to the entire story than, we are willing to admit. Sure, Arkham looked nice. It looked very good. The mechanics were splendid. And these mechanics, by the way, have been developed over many, many years. I never expected Warner Bros. Montreal to make a game at this quality. I think that's another thing, too. Gamers, we jump into this conversation very heated, and we don't necessarily try to pick the pieces and put them together over maybe years and years of development and experience. But again, Arkham Knight really did disappoint for the most part when it came down to actually dealing with the bosses. In fact, another one was even fighting the Arkham Knight. You get to fight him with your Batmobile twice. I mean, it's insane. You're fighting this guy. You're trying to defeat like all these tanks. It's like a chess battle. I could have seen how if we did that maybe once, that would have probably been a splendid iteration. But then we had to go underground again and fight some huge digger, vehicle that, he's trying to kill you. You're racing against time. Then even before you fight the Joker, you had to race again. And so the encounters were not as intuitive, in my opinion. I think if you actually look at it, and this might be a point of preference, you as a player, you are in a sense much more served if you throw hands with a boss at the end of the day, because it is a boss fight, if you get what I mean. Even though the boss fight may be somewhat frustrating to you, it is still going to provide you, that encounter that it is that you're looking for when it comes to, dealing with a boss. And eventually you kind of learn the system and you learn the patterns. Even though I can tell you that Clayface is very, very annoying in the way that he does things, eventually I was able to figure out the boss. If you notice, after maybe, getting smoked by the, the boss after a little bit, I was able to take him down. It wasn't the easiest thing I could do. Because, man, I did not think I was going to make it with this boss fight. But eventually you're able to overcome. And you feel that sense of satisfaction overall saying, man, I was able to get this done. I was able to get an encounter, a series of encounters, some with Clayface. You got multiple encounters with Harley Quinn. Even if you didn't fight her at first, you fought her goons, learned what she was up to. Freeze, you got to throw hands with twice in the game, which was absolutely insane that you could actually fight Mr. Freeze at this point. But I have to also say, as much as I criticize this, I will also give it to Arkham City. Arkham City got the job done. With Mr. Freeze's boss fight, it's probably one of the best Mr. Freeze encounters that we've seen in a long time. Sure, Arkham Origins came behind that, did a really good job in their, a Cold Hard DLC, and was able to have you encounter Mr. Freeze in a very interesting way. But, if it came to like fighting a boss, like the traditional sense, I think we can kind of come together to say, yeah, when you think about boss fights, what you think is you actually throwing hands with the boss, actually, beating bad guys. Like Hi-Fi Rush has been able to show us that you can make boss fights as creative as you possibly can. When you think about, say, maybe other games, it's possible to do it. But let's not be mistaken. Batman Arkham Knight, as much as many may hail it, is in a sense short when it comes to its quality of boss fights compared to a game as criticized, heavily held up to unfair standards as Gotham Knights is. Thanks for watching the video. We'll talk soon, hopefully in another one. Peace out.